I left them there, in the biting cold of the forest. Death was the only solution to my pain. The widowed man, blinded by grief and bitterness, felt a shiver run down his spine as he walked away from the two tiny baskets. Inside, two pairs of innocent eyes closed, the twins abandoned in a dark pact with despair. But what he didn't know was that, under the pale moonlight, a majestic white figure emerged from the dense thicket, and the roar that followed was not one of a hunt, but of a silent promise. And what was about to happen would forever change the course of a tragedy, revealing a miracle. The majestic form of the albino tiger, a rare and feared apparition, glided silently among the ancient trees, its ice-blue eyes fixed on the small abandoned baskets. The icy air of the night forest carried the faint wail of the babies, a sound that for any other creature would be an irresistible invitation to hunt. But something in those helpless cries struck an ancestral chord in the beast's heart, something that transcended predatory instinct and the logic of wild survival. It stopped a few feet away, a giant with immaculate fur that seemed to glow under the pale moonlight, its breath forming small clouds in the intense cold. The twins, wrapped in thin blankets already damp with frost, shivered uncontrollably. Their small purplish lips parted in sobs that seemed to echo the very solitude and despair of the forest. The tiger, with a slow, calculated movement that demonstrated surprising caution, approached even closer. Its enormous head lowered, sniffing the air with curiosity, and a soft growl, almost a deep, vibrant purr, escaped its throat. It was not a threat, but a manifestation of something inexplicable. It nudged one of the baskets with its snout, with a delicacy that contrasted with its brute strength, revealing the wrinkled, tear-streaked face of one of the babies. The little one's eyes opened for an instant, fixing on the immense white being before it. There was no fear in those innocent orbs, only a startling curiosity and a poignant fragility. The tiger then did the unthinkable, something that defied its entire nature. With unexpected tenderness, it lay down beside the baskets, enveloping them with its warm, muscular body. The warmth of its thick fur immediately began to ward off the biting cold that threatened the little ones' lives, and the beast's soft purr became an unlikely lullaby, a protective coo. The baby's cries gradually subsided, replaced by sighs of relief and small squeaks of comfort. The silent promise that hung over the forest was beginning to be fulfilled in a way no one could have foreseen. Meanwhile, miles away, in the cold opulence of his mansion, the widower, Mr. Alistair Finch, tried to fill the void left by the absence of his beloved wife. Every room seemed to echo the loss, and the image of the twins, whom he irrationally blamed for his suffering, still haunted him in his darkest thoughts. He sat in his leather armchair, a glass of brandy in hand, his eyes fixed on the crackling fireplace, seeking a warmth he could not feel in his soul. The decision to abandon his grandchildren, though abominable, seemed to have lifted an immediate weight from his chest, a false sense of peace he desperately tried to justify to himself. They were the constant reminder of my loss, pain incarnate, he murmured to the fire, his voice hoarse and laden with unacknowledged guilt. He imagined that the merciless cold of the forest had already done its work, eliminating the root of his pain and what he considered the cause of his unhappiness. But the forest held secrets and miracles that his tormented mind could not even conceive. That same night, a group of experienced hunters led by Elias, a man whose face was marked by time and mountain winds, ventured into the densest part of the forest. They were not there to hunt, but to track a wounded deer that had been spotted near an illegal trap, an act of justice against cruelty. The usual silence of the night was broken by an unusual sound, a mix of a deep purr and something that sounded like a muffled cry, almost imperceptible. Elias, with his vast experience, signaled his companions to stop. He knew every sound of that forest like the back of his hand, And this one was strange, almost supernatural, a whisper that didn't fit the nocturnal symphony. With redoubled caution they advanced, their steps light on the damp foliage and moss-covered ground. The strong scent of wild animal was undeniable, but there was also a sweet, delicate aroma, something that did not belong in that wild and inhospitable environment. Elias's heart began to beat faster, a powerful premonition invading him. He felt they were about to witness something extraordinary, something that would defy all human logic and belief, an event that would change the way they saw the world and nature itself. The moonlight, filtered through the treetops, began to reveal a scene that would paralyze anyone, an image of wild beauty and unexpected protection. Elias and his companions froze, their eyes wide, unable to process what they saw. There, nestled among the gnarled roots of an ancient oak, was the legendary albino tiger, its massive, snow-white body glowing with an almost ethereal intensity. And to their breathtaking astonishment, it was not alone. Two tiny baskets rested beside its flank, and from within them the sleeping faces of two babies. The beast's warmth radiated, forming a protective aura against the night's cold, and a soft, deep, constant purr lulled the little ones. "By the heavens," whispered one of the hunters, his voice choked with disbelief, while Elias merely shook his head slowly, his lips parted. He had heard stories of the white tiger, legends whispered around campfires, but never imagined he would witness such a miracle. His eyes scanned the scene, noting the delicacy with which the tiger kept one of its front paws slightly curved, forming a subtle barrier around the baskets. The babies, a boy and a girl, seemed to sleep soundly, their small, fragile bodies warmed by the predator's dense fur. There was no sign of fear in them, only the serenity of those who feel safe, a stark contrast to nature's expected brutality. The tiger, sensing the men's presence, slowly raised its head. Its ice-blue eyes, previously fixed on the babies, now turned to the hunters. There was no aggression in its gaze, only a calm and unwavering vigilance, the posture of a guardian, not a lurking predator. Elias raised his hand, signaling his men not to make any sudden movements. That moment was sacred, a testament to nature's ability to transcend its own instincts, to offer shelter where least expected. The cold forest breeze seemed to carry not only the scent of pine and damp earth, but also a sense of reverence. They stood before something that defied reason, an improbable link between the wildest life and the purest innocence. The scene was a tableau of unexpected tenderness, a reminder that protection could arise from the most unlikely sources, and that life, even in its most vulnerable form, found ways to persist. The hunters, rough men accustomed to the harshness of forest life, felt their hearts soften. The expressions on their faces were of pure awe and a deep emotion they could barely name. One of them, a young man named Marco, felt his eyes well up. How is this possible?" he murmured, his voice almost a whisper, while another, the oldest of the group, crossed his arms over his chest as if seeking comfort for his troubled mind. Elias, with a nod, indicated for them to approach with utmost caution, their steps light on the damp foliage. It was necessary to check the baby's condition, but without disturbing the protective beast, which seemed to emanate an aura of peace. With each step, the miracle became more real, more palpable. The image of the tiger, majestic and serene, beside the helpless little ones, would be etched forever in their minds, a story that would defy the logic and skepticism of anyone who heard it. The urgency to save the wounded deer was completely replaced by the need to understand and protect this new and much more fragile life. The group moved in a semicircle, maintaining a respectful distance, their eyes fixed on the scene, trying to absorb every detail of that extraordinary sight, a gift from nature they would never forget. Far from there, within the cold walls of his mansion, Mr. Alistair Finch tried to ward off a growing unease. The brandy in his glass seemed to have lost its taste, and the warmth of the fireplace no longer comforted him. A strange sensation, a shiver that did not come from the cold, ran down his spine, mingling with a void that became increasingly unbearable. He stood up, walking to the window, observing the darkness of the night that seemed to swallow the landscape. A part of his mind, the one he tried to silence with all his might, whispered about the twins, about the forest, about the fate he had imposed upon them. He struggled to believe he had done the right thing, that the pain would dissipate with their absence, that life would regain some meaning. But the truth was that the emptiness in his chest, previously filled by the pain of his wife's loss, now seemed to have expanded, harboring a new and unsettling shadow: guilt. He closed his eyes, the image of the innocent faces returning to haunt him, accompanied by a faint, distant sound he couldn't identify, but which seemed like a lament, an echo of something lost. No, I can't think about it. He chastised himself, clenching his fists so tightly that his nails dug into his palms. The false peace he sought was fragile, and with each passing minute it seemed to disintegrate a little more, leaving him at the mercy of a truth he was not yet ready to face. The night advanced, and with it, the inevitability of a dawn that would bring revelations, that would shake the foundations of his existence, forcing him to confront the extent of his own cruelty and the magnitude of a miracle that was beyond his comprehension. Alistair Finch, immersed in the oppressive shadows of his mansion, felt dawn approach not as a promise of a new day, but as the inevitability of a truth he feared. Each passing minute unraveled the fragile illusion of peace he had built upon the abandonment, and guilt, once a distant whisper, now echoed like thunder in his chest. He tossed and turned in bed, sleep denying him refuge. The image of the twins' faces etched in his mind, mingled with the merciless cold he imagined had swallowed their tiny lives. The shiver that ran through him was not from the night's cold, but from the ice of his own conscience, which was beginning to melt, revealing the monstrosity of his act. He squeezed his eyes shut, as if he could ward off the visions and sounds his tormented mind created, but it was useless. The night, which he hoped would bring oblivion, brought only the amplification of his torment, setting the stage for revelations that would shake the foundations of his existence, forcing him to confront the extent of his own cruelty and the magnitude of a miracle that was beyond his comprehension. Meanwhile, in the forest, the scene before Elias and his companions remained untouched, a tableau of wild beauty and unexpected protection. The albino tiger, majestic and serene, kept its ice-blue eyes fixed on the men, a calm vigilance that denoted no threat, but an unwavering presence. Elias, his voice low and laden with reverence, finally broke the silence. "Don't make any sudden movements. It's watching us." Marco, still with tear-filled eyes, nodded, unable to tear his gaze from the babies nestled against the predator's flank. The oldest of the group, a man of few words, merely shook his head, a mixture of awe and deep respect on his face. The beast, as if understanding the men's intention, or perhaps sensing its role had been fulfilled, moved. There was no haste, no aggression. With impressive dignity, the tiger slowly rose, its massive white body gradually disappearing among the shadows and the mist that was beginning to form with the approach of dawn. Its eyes, previously fixed on the hunters, cast a final glance at the baskets, a silent farewell before its ethereal form completely dissolved into the dense thicket, leaving behind only silence and the residual warmth of its presence. Elias stepped forward, the others following him, their hearts still racing from the sight. They knelt beside the baskets, disbelief still etched on their faces. The babies, a boy and a girl, slept soundly, their small bodies surprisingly warmed by the blankets and the heat the tiger had radiated. There were no signs of extreme cold, only the serenity of those who had been protected by a greater force. Marco reached out, gently touching the boy's rosy face, and a smile of relief and pure emotion lit up his face. "They're all right, Elias. They're all right." Elias touched the girl's forehead, feeling her pleasant temperature. "It's a miracle, my friends. A true miracle." He looked at his companions, determination replacing awe in his eyes. "We need to take them to the village. We need to tell what we saw. No one would believe it, but we can't leave them here." With care and tenderness, the hunters lifted the baskets, each feeling the light weight of the babies like a precious treasure. The urgency to save the wounded deer had been completely forgotten, replaced by a new and much deeper responsibility. The journey back through the forest, which was once for hunting, was now for salvation. And the pale light of dawn that began to filter through the treetops seemed to bless their steps, announcing the beginning of a new story. With each step they took, the forest seemed to whisper ancient secrets, but the miracle they carried in their arms was the newest and most astonishing of stories. Elias and his companions, once hardened hunters, now moved with an almost sacred reverence, the baskets with the babies firmly yet delicately cradled in their arms. The boy and the girl, still asleep, seemed like little treasures, and the warmth emanating from them was a balm for the men's souls. Marco, with a gentle smile, looked at the girl's tiny face, feeling an inexplicable connection. "Who would have thought, Elias," he murmured, "that the fiercest of predators would be the gentlest of guardians?" Elias merely nodded, his eyes fixed on the path ahead, but his mind still processed the image of the white tiger, majestic and protective. Disbelief mingled with joy and a profound gratitude. They knew the village would hardly believe their story, but the proof was there, alive and breathing in their arms. The sunlight, now stronger, began to gild the treetops, and the silhouette of the first houses of the village appeared on the horizon, an invitation to hope and truth. The news spread like wildfire. The first villagers who saw the hunters return, not with game, but with 2 baskets and expressions of awe, ran to alert the others. Within minutes, a small crowd formed in the central square, curious and concerned gazes fixed on the newcomers. A white-haired lady, Donna Aurora, known for her wisdom and kindness, was the first to approach, her eyes wide at the sight of the babies. "By the heavens, Elias, what is this?" Elias, his voice choked with emotion, began to narrate the unbelievable story, from the crying in the forest to the sight of the albino tiger. The murmurs of the crowd turned into exclamations of astonishment and disbelief, but the sight of the babies, safe and sound, disproved any skepticism. Donna Aurora, with tears in her eyes, picked up one of the babies, cradling it in her arms. "They are a miracle, Elias, a pure miracle." The other women of the village hurried to offer help, bringing warm blankets and milk, their hearts touched by the fragility and the extraordinary story the children carried. The entire village, previously silent, now buzzed with the story of the guardian tiger and the found babies, a tale that defied logic and brought a new kind of hope. While the village celebrated the miracle in the cold mansion, Alistair Finch awoke to a day that promised to be even darker than the night. The sun, streaming through the windows, brought no warmth, only exposed the desolation of his heart. Guilt, once a subtle sting, was now a searing pain that prevented him from breathing. He stood up, staggering, and went to the window, observing the outside world with empty eyes. Breakfast, untouched, waited on the table, but he felt no hunger, only a corrosive emptiness. Suddenly, the muffled sound of voices coming from the kitchen caught his attention. His servants, usually discreet, seemed agitated. he heard fragments of phrases, "in the forest, with Elias, 2 babies, and most shockingly, a white tiger, they say." Alistair felt his blood run cold. His mind, in a whirlwind of denial and dread, tried to reject the idea. But a part of him already knew. That distant lament from the night before, the shiver, it all made sense now. He clung to the window frame, his knuckles white, his face pale. The babies were alive. And not just alive, but protected by something he, in his cruelty, could never have foreseen. The magnitude of his monstrous act and the proof of the miracle he tried to destroy collided in his mind, plunging him into an abyss of regret. His eyes filled with tears, not of anger, but of a deep pain and overwhelming shame. He had failed in his attempt to eliminate pain and instead had created a much greater pain, one that would consume him from within. The journey of redemption, which he did not yet know would begin, was about to start, driven by the indomitable force of life and the unexpected compassion of nature. Alistair felt the ground give way beneath him. The words, 2 babies and white tiger danced in his mind like flames, burning away the last barrier of denial. He released the window frame, hands trembling, and took a staggering step, the air thick. The image of the innocent faces, which he had tried to erase, resurfaced with brutal clarity, alive, protected, by a wild animal. The irony was a punch to the gut, more painful than grief. He, their grandfather, had abandoned them. Nature had reached out. A wave of nausea hit him. He bent over, hands on his knees, trying to control his breathing. Tears, once a mere sketch of pain, now streamed hot, washing his wrinkled face. They were not of self-pity, but of deep, soul-rending shame. He was a monster. In his selfish pain, he had tried to destroy innocence. The miracle in the forest was a cruel mirror, reflecting the monstrosity of his heart. In the kitchen, the servants' voices continued, more animated, mixed with exclamations of admiration and relief. Donna Aurora picked them up. They say they're fine. The tiger. Who would have thought? Alistair could no longer hear. The sound of guilt was deafening. He dragged himself to the armchair, sinking into it, his body heavy. The brandy, forgotten, lay beside him, a bitter reminder of his failure. While Alistair struggled in his purgatory, in the village, the central square overflowed with life and emotion. The babies, clean and fed, rested in makeshift cradles in Donna Aurora's house, under the watchful and loving eyes of several women. The boy, with clenched fists, slept soundly. The girl opened her light blue eyes, observing the new world with serene curiosity. Elias, Marco, and the hunters, exhausted but with renewed spirits, told and retold the story, each detail gaining more strength and magic. The community, previously divided between disbelief and awe, now united around that miracle. Who could have done such a thing? Asked a neighbor, her voice choked, abandoning little angels like that in the cold of the forest. The question echoed in the air, laden with indignation and sadness, but also with a determination to protect the children. Donna Aurora, holding the girl's tiny hand, felt the warmth of life pulsing. Her eyes, which had seen so many joys and sorrows, now shone with renewed hope. "It doesn't matter who abandoned them, my child," she murmured to the little one. "What matters is that they are here, and life has given them a second chance, a protection that came from where we least expected it." The village, with its simplicity and human warmth, embraced the twins, offering them the refuge their grandfather had denied them. Alistair, in his isolated mansion, felt the pressure of the truth. He knew the story of the babies would spread, and the question of who had abandoned them would soon arise. The mask of indifference he had built was in ruins. He needed to do something, not to alleviate his guilt, but to repair the harm caused. The journey would be long and painful, but the image of the babies, safe and sound, in the arms of strangers and protected by a beast, ignited a flame of hope. Redemption would not be easy, but perhaps possible. He stood up, his body heavy, but with new determination, a glimpse of a path forward. Alistair's footsteps echoed in the silent corridor as he headed for the main door, a heavy coat thrown over his shoulders, like armor against the world's cold and the chill of his own soul. His breathing was shallow, his heart beating an uneven rhythm, a mixture of fear and a strange, almost imperceptible spark of hope. The idea of going to the village, of facing those faces he imagined filled with revulsion, was terrifying. But the alternative, to live the rest of his days consumed by guilt and cowardice, was even more unbearable. He needed to see the twins, needed to know they were truly well, and somehow begin to repair the wrong he had done. As he opened the massive oak door, the faint morning sunlight bathed his pale face. The fresh mountain air, which once seemed icy and indifferent to him, now carried the scent of pine and damp earth, a vivid reminder of the forest where he had committed his cruelest act. He stepped outside, his eyes squinting, adjusting to the brightness. It was then that he saw. A simple, dusty car stopped at the end of his long driveway, and from it descended Elias, the weather-beaten hunter, accompanied by a figure Alistair recognized as the local police chief, a serious man of few words. Alistair's blood ran cold. They weren't there by chance. The news had reached them, and the village, with its simple and direct justice, was already in motion. Elias and the police chief walked towards the mansion, their expressions grave, their eyes fixed on Alistair standing at the door. There was no open hostility, but a seriousness that spoke volumes. The hunter, who had witnessed the miracle in the forest, was now there. At the door of the man he did not yet know was the monster. Alistair felt a knot in his throat. He had prepared to go to them, to confess on his own terms, but their unexpected arrival completely reversed the situation. Now, he was the one confronted, the suspect, even before he had a chance to speak. The shame that consumed him intensified, mingling with a chilling dread. How could he explain the inexplicable? How could he ask for forgiveness for such an inhumane act? Elias was the first to speak, his voice grave but restrained. "Mr. Finch, we need to talk. It's about the babies." The direct mention of the twins made Alistair stagger slightly. His eyes met Elias's, and in the hunter's gaze, Alistair saw not only concern, but also a spark of barely contained indignation. The police chief, for his part, remained silent, his posture observant and imposing, his arms crossed over his chest. Alistair swallowed hard, his mouth dry. I know about the babies," he managed to murmur, his voice hoarse, almost unrecognizable to himself. He knew there was no escape. The turning point had arrived not as a path to be trodden by his own will, but as an avalanche that forced him to face the truth head-on, without masks. The journey of redemption would not be a choice, but an imposition, a judgment that would begin there, on the doorstep of his own home, under the eyes of those who represented the community he had wounded so deeply. With each passing second, the weight of his guilt became more unbearable, but paradoxically, the presence of Elias and the police chief also brought a strange sense of relief. The secret was about to be revealed, and perhaps, just perhaps, in truth, there would be a path to peace. Elias stepped forward, his expression serious, but without the anger Alistair expected. "Mr. Finch," he began, his voice calm but firm, "the babies have been found. They are well, thanks to a miracle we still struggle to believe." He paused, his deep blue eyes fixed on Alistair's, searching for something, perhaps a sign of humanity. They were found in the forest, in a basket, and they were. protected. The last word hung in the air, laden with a meaning Alistair understood with acute pain. The police chief, Captain Mendez, broke the silence with a grave and formal voice. "Mr. Finch, the community is shocked. We need answers. Who would do something so cruel to defenseless children?" Alistair felt the world spin. The question, direct and merciless, was a hammer striking his soul. His lips trembled, and he clenched his hands, his nails digging into his palms. There was no way to lie, no way to hide. The image of the twins' faces warmed by the tiger superimposed itself on the vision of his own cruelty. He was the monster. He was the one who had done it. Shame was a poison spreading through his veins, paralyzing him. I abandoned them," he confessed, his voice almost inaudible, a hoarse whisper that barely made it past the lump in his throat. His eyes, once full of despair, now fixed on the ground, unable to face the disapproval he knew would come. The air seemed to grow heavier. Elias and Captain Mendez exchanged a glance, a mixture of sadness and grim confirmation. There was no complete surprise. Perhaps the village's intuition had already pointed to the reclusive widower. "Why, Mr. Finch?" Elias asked, his voice now tinged with deep sadness. "Why would you do something like that to your own grandchildren?" Alistair raised his eyes, tears welling up, his face contorted with pain. "My wife, she's gone. I blamed them. For the pain, for the emptiness. I was blinded by my own misery." The words poured out in a torrent, laden with years of grief and regret. He shook his head, a gesture of despair. "I thought that if they were gone, the pain would disappear. But it only got worse. I was a fool, a monster." Captain Mendez stepped forward, his posture softer. "Mr. Finch, what you did is serious, but the truth is a first step." Meanwhile, in the village, the news of Elias and Captain Mendez's arrival at Alistair's mansion spread quickly. Donna Aurora, with one of the babies asleep in her arms, felt a tightening in her chest. "May the Lord forgive him," she murmured, thinking of the widower. The community, though shocked by the confession, began to feel a touch of compassion for the solitary and tormented figure that was Alistair Finch. The story of the tiger's miracle and the babies had softened hearts, and the idea that the grandfather might be suffering as much as they were from his loss, albeit in a distorted way, began to take root. Justice for them was not just punishment, but also the chance for redemption. That day, which began with the revelation of cruelty, opened up to the possibility of forgiveness and a new beginning. Alistair, there on the doorstep, felt the weight of the world, but a small sliver of light began to appear on his clouded horizon. He had spoken the truth, and that in itself was a relief. Alistair, with the truth finally exposed, felt a tremor run through his body. The relief of no longer carrying that monstrous secret was almost as overwhelming as the shame that flooded him. He looked up at Elias and Captain Mendez, expecting immediate condemnation, but found on their faces a complex mixture of sadness, seriousness, and perhaps a spark of understanding that disarmed him. Captain Mendez, after a moment of heavy silence, broke the quiet with a softer voice, without the harshness Alistair feared. "Mr. Finch," he said, "what you did is, without a doubt, a serious crime. But your confession and the clarity with which you express your regret are a crucial starting point. We cannot ignore the law, but neither can we ignore the depth of pain that led you to such a desperate act." He gestured with his hand, indicating the mansion and, implicitly, the isolated life and grief that consumed Alistair. "The community has the right to know the truth, and the babies above all need a safe future and a home." Elias, who had been the first to find the twins and witness the tiger's miracle, intervened, his voice laden with serene gravity. "Captain, perhaps there is another form of justice here. Mr. Finch needs to face the consequences of his actions, yes, but perhaps the most severe punishment is the one he has already imposed on himself and the one life holds for him. And the community. The community needs to understand. They saw the miracle. Perhaps they can see the possibility of redemption, even in such a wounded heart. His deep blue eyes met Alistair's, and this time there was genuine compassion, not just the initial indignation. You need to go to the village, Mr. Finch. You need to see the babies with your own eyes, and you need to tell your story to everyone. Not to ask for forgiveness, for that is not something one asks for, but to begin to earn it, step by step. Alistair felt a chill run down his spine. Go to the village, face those faces, those eyes that would surely judge him severely. The idea was excruciating, a torment that seemed worse than any cell, but Elias's words resonated in his mind. Not to ask for forgiveness, but to earn it. It was a crucial distinction, an arduous path, but one that offered a chance, however small, for peace. He clenched his fists, determination growing amidst the paralyzing fear. "I will go," he replied, his voice still hoarse with emotion, but with a new firmness that surprised even himself. "I will do whatever it takes to try and repair the harm I caused." Captain Mendez nodded slowly, a glimpse of approval in his gaze. "Very well, Mr. Finch. It won't be easy. Trust is something earned back with time and actions, but truth is the indispensable foundation for any reconstruction." He turned to Elias. "Let's go to the village. Prepare the community for this meeting. We need a council, a space for everyone to listen, and together decide the best path for the future of these babies and for justice." In the village, the news of Alistair Finch's confession spread like a whisper of wind among the houses, laden with surprise and reflection. Donna Aurora, who was cradling the girl with affection, felt a complex mixture of sadness and a strange hope. She had seen the pain in the widower's eyes on rare occasions, and although his act was unforgivable in its cruelty, the humanity behind his misery could not be entirely ignored by a heart as kind as hers. The women of the village, gathered in Donna Aurora's house, exchanged glances, each processing the information in her own way. The initial indignation gave way to a deeper reflection on human fragility. "He was blinded by pain," commented Maria, a neighbor who had lost her husband young and knew the abyss of grief. "Despair can do terrible things to people, distort reason." Another, Clara, nodded, but with a heavy sigh. "But abandoning one's own grandchildren, that is an abyss of cruelty that I struggle to understand." Donna Aurora, with the wisdom of years and serenity on her face, looked up, her gaze resting on the sleeping babies. "Yes, it is an abyss. But the tiger's miracle showed us that life always finds a way, and that compassion can come from where we least expect it, even from the wildest sources. Perhaps redemption can also find its way if there is a heart willing to seek it." She looked at the twins, small beacons of hope, and at the women around her. "He needs to see the light he tried to extinguish. And we, as a community, need to show him that, even wounded, we can be a place of healing and a new beginning." Alistair's decision to go to the village, to expose himself to the truth and judgment, and the community's openness to a path of justice that included redemption, marked a new and uncertain chapter. It would not be an easy path, but the seed of overcoming had been planted. The village, with its simplicity and strong sense of community and values, was about to face one of its greatest challenges: to judge a man not only for his heinous crime, but for the complexity of his pain and misery, and to decide if hope could flourish even in the most arid lands of the human heart, offering a chance for connection and a future for the little twins. Alistair felt the weight of each step as he walked down the driveway towards the village. The air, once fresh and invigorating, now seemed dense, almost suffocating. His shoulders were hunched, not only from age, but from the invisible burden of his guilt. With each meter he advanced, the mansion, his refuge of grief and isolation, receded behind him, and the village, with its murmurs and expectant gazes, grew before him. His hands, which had trembled before, were now clenched into fists, an attempt to contain the avalanche of emotions that threatened to engulf him. He knew it wasn't condemnation he feared most, but the possibility of not being forgiven, neither by himself nor by the community. The image of the babies, safe and sound, nestled with the tiger, was a beacon of light and a constant torture in his mind. In the village, an unusual quiet hung over the central square. The children, usually noisy and full of life, were at home under the watchful eyes of their mothers. The men, returning from work in the fields, stopped in groups, their voices muffled, their eyes fixed on the road leading to Finch Mansion. The news of Alistair's confession had spread, and with it a complex mixture of indignation, curiosity, and a touch of compassion. Donna Aurora, sitting on her porch, cradled the girl, who was sleeping soundly. The boy was in a makeshift cradle beside her, a small smile on his lips. She watched the road, her heart heavy, but with an unwavering faith in humanity's capacity for overcoming. "He's coming," she whispered to herself, her eyes welling up. "May God guide him." When Alistair finally emerged from the final bend in the road, the entire square seemed to hold its breath. The murmurs ceased, replaced by a deafening silence. Every pair of eyes was fixed on him, a silent judgment that pierced him to the soul. He saw Captain Mendez and Elias standing near the center, their expressions serious but not accusatory. Beside them, a small group of village elders, their faces etched with life, watched him with a gravity that spoke of wisdom and pain. Alistair felt his face flush, blood pulsing in his temples. He raised his chin, a remnant of his former haughtiness, but his eyes, red and swollen, revealed the profound vulnerability that consumed him. He walked to the center of the square, his steps echoing in the silence. He stopped a few feet from Elias and Captain Mendez, his gaze sweeping over the faces of the community. He saw Maria, the neighbor who had spoken of despair, and Clara, who still struggled to understand. His eyes met Donna Aurora's, who offered him a look of sadness, but also of a strange, almost maternal understanding. That unexpected compassion was a blow stronger than any accusation. Alistair lowered his head for an instant, feeling unworthy of such a gaze. Captain Mendez was the first to speak, his voice resonating with authority, but tempered with a seriousness that invited reflection. "Alistair Finch is here to speak with us, to tell us his truth." He gestured to Alistair, who raised his head again. The widower felt his throat tighten, words caught. He took a deep breath, the cold air burning his lungs. I came," he began, his voice hoarse, almost inaudible. "I came to confess what I did, and to ask. No, to begin to earn your forgiveness." He paused, his eyes welling up, fixing on the babies in Donna Aurora's arms. The sight of the little ones, so serene and innocent, was a vivid reminder of the monstrosity of his act and the miracle that life and an albino tiger had wrought. The overcoming of his own selfish pain began there, in the village square, under the watchful eyes of everyone. He continued, words flowing with difficulty but with brutal honesty. "I was blinded by the pain of losing my wife. I blamed them, these little angels, for my own misery. In my madness, I abandoned them in the forest, believing that I would thus eliminate the root of my suffering." A wave of murmurs ran through the crowd, some of shock, others of contained anger. Alistair did not avert his gaze. "I was a monster, a coward, but fate, or perhaps something greater, did not allow my cruelty to prevail. The babies were saved, and I I saw the extent of my monstrosity. There is no excuse for what I did, only regret." He bowed slightly, a gesture of humility none of them would ever have imagined seeing from the proud Alistair Finch. The journey of redemption, painful and uncertain, had truly begun. Alistair remained bowed, the gesture of humility a physical weight on his shoulders. The silence that followed his confession was more deafening than any angry shout. He expected stones, harsh words, and looks of contempt, but received only the echo of his own truth in the cold morning air. Slowly he raised his head, his eyes scanning the faces before him. The expressions varied, some with brows furrowed in deep sadness, others with lips pressed tight in disapproval. But few with the blind fury he so feared. Indignation was there, yes, but mixed with a complexity Alistair did not expect. Donna Aurora, still cradling the girl, took a step forward. Her face, marked by the wrinkles of life, radiated a serenity that contrasted with the tension of the moment. She did not speak, but her eyes, full of a compassion that seemed to embrace everyone, met Alistair's. In that gaze, he saw not immediate forgiveness, but the promise that humanity, even in its most fragile and flawed form, could still be embraced. It was a silent invitation to healing, to reconstruction. Maria, the neighbor who had lost her husband, was the first to break the silence. "Pain is an abyss, Mr. Finch," she said, her voice choked. "It can blind us to everything, even to the purest love." Her words were not an excuse, but an acknowledgement of the human fragility that everyone, to some degree, understood. Clara, beside her, nodded, her eyes welling up. But these little ones, they were innocent. Her voice was a lament, a reminder of wounded innocence. Captain Mendez, observing the scene with his usual gravity, noticed the change in the air. The community's initial fury began to give way to deeper reflection, to a search for understanding, even if they could not immediately forgive. He knew that justice in that place would not just be a matter of law, but of heart. "Alistair Finch has confessed his crime," the captain declared, his voice firm. "He regrets it, but regret by itself does not erase what has been done. We need to decide, as a community, what path to take to ensure these babies have the future they deserve and that justice is served." Elias, the hunter, who had been the link between cruelty and miracle, placed a hand on Alistair's shoulder. The gesture, unexpected, was not one of comfort but of support to keep him steady. "The tiger showed us that life can be protected in the most unexpected ways," Elias said, his voice resonating with a simple and powerful truth. "Perhaps the community can show that hope can be cultivated, even in the most arid lands of the human heart." Alistair felt a strange warmth spread through his chest, a sensation he hadn't known in a long time. It wasn't happiness, nor complete relief, but a spark of hope, the promise that perhaps he wasn't completely lost. He looked at the babies in Donna Aurora's arms, then at the faces of the community, and a new determination ignited in his eyes. The journey of redemption would be long and painful, but he was willing to walk it step by step, facing every gaze, every word, every obstacle. He would do whatever it took to earn the chance of a new beginning, not just for himself, but for the grandchildren he had abandoned. Silence returned, but this time it was a silence of deep contemplation, not of shock. The village was ready to face its challenge, and Alistair for his. The silence in the village square, once laden with shock, transformed into a thoughtful, almost reverent quietude. Alistair, still bowed, felt the weight of gazes upon him, but perceived that the initial fury had given way to deeper analysis. His heart beat unevenly, a mixture of dread and a strange, almost imperceptible spark of hope. He looked up again at Donna Aurora, who, with the sleeping girl in her arms, conveyed a serene strength. That gaze, devoid of cruel judgment, offered a sliver of light in his personal abyss. He knew the village's verdict would not be simple, but the complexity of that silence indicated that justice there would be woven with threads of compassion and wisdom. Captain Mendez, with a nod to the elders, stepped forward. His voice, though grave, did not carry the harshness of before. Alistair Finch has confessed his act, an act that deeply wounded this community and, above all, these two innocent little ones. He paused, sweeping the crowd with his gaze. The law has its course, yes, but this village has always known that true justice goes beyond punishment. It seeks reparation, healing, and the possibility of a new path, and that is what we will seek today. A murmur of agreement ran through the square, confirming the captain's vision. Donna Aurora, with a soft but firm voice, broke the formality. "Captain, the babies need more than legal justice. They need love, a home, and a family. They need to know that, even in the face of the greatest darkness, the light of care and affection will always reach them." She looked directly at Alistair, her eyes welling up. "Mr. Finch, you took away their safest beginning, but life, through the miracle of the tiger, gave them a second chance. And now, the community offers them a third." Alistair swallowed hard, feeling the depth of those words. Elias, the hunter who had witnessed the miracle, joined them. "Alistair," he began, using his first name for the first time, a sign that the social distance was diminishing. "The community has gathered and, after much reflection, has decided that your redemption will not come in a cell, but in this village square. You shall live here in a simple house and dedicate your days to the babies. You will care for them, learn to love them, and prove every day that you are worthy of being their grandfather. You will work for the community, helping wherever needed, and live under the watchful eye of everyone. Your wealth will have no value here, only your actions." Elias's words fell upon Alistair like a lightning bolt, but a bolt that, instead of destroying, illuminated a previously invisible path. Live in the village, care for the babies, give up his fortune and his isolation. It was a sentence more frightening than any prison, for it demanded the total surrender of his pride and his pain. His knees buckled, but he held firm. The fear was immense, but the sight of the little ones in Donna Aurora's arms, the promise of a chance to love and be loved, began to overcome the terror. It was the overcoming of everything he had been. He took a deep breath, the cold air filling his lungs with a new and strange vitality. I accept," he said, his voice choked with emotion but laden with unwavering determination. "I will do whatever it takes. I will care for them, love them, and dedicate my life to proving I am worthy. I thank this community for giving me a chance at redemption." His eyes, once clouded with despair, now shone with a new light, the light of a man who had found in the depths of his monstrosity the path to humanity. The journey, he knew, would be long and full of challenges, but for the first time in a long time, Alistair Finch felt he had a purpose, a future. Alistair, his eyes welling up with an emotion he hadn't felt in a long time, felt the weight of Elias's and Donna Aurora's words settle in his soul. It was not the liberation that prison would offer, but a much more demanding freedom, that of confronting himself with each new dawn. He nodded, a lump in his throat, and saw on the faces of the community a mixture of relief and skepticism. The journey had begun, and the first step would be the hardest. The next morning, the sun had barely risen when Alistair, with a small suitcase containing essentials, walked down the driveway for the last time as the reclusive lord of the mansion. The simple house the community had prepared for him was at the edge of the village, with a small wooden porch and a modest garden. It was a stark contrast to the luxury he was accustomed to, but strangely, he did not feel the revulsion he expected. Elias awaited him at the door, with a restrained smile. "Welcome to your new home, Alistair," he said, extending his hand. The handshake was firm, a silent pact of a new beginning. The first few days were a whirlwind of emotions and unfamiliar tasks. Alistair, who had never changed a diaper or prepared a bottle, found himself clumsy and frustrated. The babies, now named Clara and Arthur, in honor of the hope and strength they represented, were small miracles in his life. Donna Aurora, with infinite patience and a heart of gold, was his mentor. She taught him to hold the girl gently, to warm the milk to the right temperature, and to soothe the boy with soft songs. Alistair, initially rigid and ashamed of his ineptitude, began to relax under her gentle gaze. His fingers, once accustomed to documents and pens, now moved with new attentiveness when changing tiny clothes or cradling one of the twins. He watched Donna Aurora with admiration, noting the way she spoke to the babies, how her eyes shone with pure love. One afternoon, as she cradled Arthur, Alistair saw a tear roll down her face. "They are so precious, Mr. Finch," she whispered, without taking her eyes off the baby. "Every laugh, every sigh. It's a gift. You have a chance to rediscover that." Her words pierced Alistair's heart, revealing the barrenness of his own previous existence. He felt a strange warmth in his chest, a mixture of pain for lost time and a new, overwhelming tenderness. The community, though still cautious, observed. The women, who once looked at him with scorn, now exchanged softer glances as they saw him push the baby carriage through the square or try to mend a fence in the field, his hands inexperienced, but his will unwavering. The men, who worked alongside him, noticed his humility and genuine effort. Alistair, who once prided himself on his wealth and power, now found value in simple things: Clara's smile, Arthur's tight hug, a neighbor's nod. Gradually, the barrier of distrust began to yield. It wasn't complete forgiveness, but a gradual acceptance of his presence, of his attempt at reparation. He still carried the weight of his past, but with each passing day, each diaper changed, each laugh from the babies, a small part of his soul healed. Captain Mendez, on one of his visits, observed Alistair playing with Arthur, who held his finger tightly. "It seems justice found a different path for you, Mr. Finch," he commented, a slight smile on his lips. Alistair looked up, and for the first time smiled back, a genuine smile, without bitterness. "Yes, Captain," he replied, his voice lighter, "and it's a path worth treading." The resolution of conflicts once so distant began to manifest in the simplicity of his new life, in the connection he was building, step by step, with the family he had tried to destroy, and with the community that had welcomed him. Months turned into years. Alistair, once a stranger in his own existence, flourished in the village routine. His days were filled with the laughter of Clara and Arthur, who now ran through the house and the small garden, their golden hair shining under the sun. He told them stories before bedtime, his wrinkled hands holding their small ones with a tenderness he never imagined possessing. Each morning, waking to the call of birds and the distant hum of the village, Alistair felt a profound peace. The mansion, with its painful memories and oppressive silence, was now a distant memory. His simple home, smelling of wood and childhood, was his true home. The community, which initially observed him with a mixture of curiosity and distrust, had, little by little, opened its hearts. The women, who once exchanged disapproving glances, now greeted him with sincere smiles in the square. The men, with whom he worked in the fields, treated him as an equal, sharing jokes and the day's fatigue. Alistair, who once valued only power and wealth, now found true value in mutual help, in the warmth of a simple conversation, and in the sense of belonging. He helped mend fences, carry sacks of grain, and care for animals. His hands, once soft, now calloused and strong. Donna Aurora, with her wisdom and serenity, continued to be a beacon on his journey. She watched Alistair with a sparkle in her eyes, witnessing the complete transformation of a man who had been lost in darkness. "Love has a power that transcends pain, Mr. Finch," she said one afternoon, as they watched Clara and Arthur playing with a puppy. "You found yourself by finding love for them." Alistair merely nodded, silent tears streaming down his marked face. He was no longer ashamed of his emotions. Guilt was still there, a distant shadow, but it no longer consumed him. It had been replaced by an overwhelming love and an unwavering purpose. Clara and Arthur grew up strong and happy, without any memory of the abandonment. For them, Alistair was simply their grandfather, the man who loved them unconditionally, who taught them to fish in the river and to recognize the stars in the night sky. They were living proof that life always finds a way, and that love can heal the deepest wounds. On a festive day in the village, Alistair, with Arthur on his shoulders and Clara holding his hand, looked at the crowd. He saw Elias the hunter, who waved with a smile. He saw Captain Mendes, who offered him a respectful greeting, and he saw Donna Aurora, who smiled at him with her heart. He had found his redemption not in escape or oblivion, but in the acceptance of his pain and the surrender to love. The miracle of the albino tiger, which had saved the babies and forced Alistair to confront his monstrosity, remained a living legend in the village. A reminder that salvation can come from the wildest and most unexpected sources. Alistair, now a loving grandfather and a respected member of the community, was proof that the human heart, even in the most arid lands, can flourish again, offering a future of connection, overcoming, and a love that transcends any darkness. The years that followed the village festival solidified Alistair's new life, weaving him into the fabric of the community. Clara and Arthur, now 12 years old, were the embodiment of joy and resilience. Their laughter echoed through the simple house, mingling with the sounds of the village. Their bright eyes mirrored their grandfather's healed soul. Alistair, with greying hair and deep wrinkles, carried in each one the story of his transformation. His hands, once hesitant, now firm and gentle, helped Arthur mend traps or braided Clara's hair. He watched them grow, each step, each discovery, a gift. The memory of the abandonment, never erased, had transformed into a reminder of the darkness and the light that love brought. He instilled in them the values he had learned: kindness, compassion, and unity. Donna Aurora, with the wisdom of time, remained his confidant and guide. One afternoon, on the porch, as Clara and Arthur played, she held Alistair's wrinkled hand. "Look at them, Alistair," she said softly. "They are living proof that life always finds a way, and that love rebuilds any ruin." Alistair squeezed her hand, his eyes welling up. "I can never thank this community enough. They gave me more than a second chance. They gave me a soul." The albino tiger's presence, though physical, had vanished, but its legend lived on in every story and children's drawing. It was the symbol of a miracle, of divine protection, and of nature's ability to intervene. For Alistair, the tiger was a reminder that salvation can come from the wildest and most unexpected sources, and that compassion knows no bounds. He had found his place. He was no longer the reclusive millionaire, but Grandfather Alistair, the helpful neighbor, the storyteller. He participated in village meetings, his opinions valued not for his wealth, but for his wisdom and humility. Children surrounded him, drawn by his kindness and the stories of the past, which he told in a hoarse but lively voice. One day, Clara asked, "Grandpa, why did you come to live here? Didn't you have a big house before?" Alistair looked into her eyes, a sad smile. "I did, my dear. But this house, this village, you all, are my true home. It was here that I learned what truly matters." He hugged her tightly, feeling the warmth of her body and the scent of earth and sun in her hair. Arthur, more introspective, asked, "And the tiger, Grandpa? Was it real? Alistair smiled. Yes, my son, very real. It showed us that love and protection come from where we least expect them. It taught that life is a gift and that we must always take care of each other. In that moment, Alistair felt a fullness that no fortune could buy. He faced his demons, embraced his regret, and, through the unconditional love of his grandchildren and the acceptance of the community, found redemption. That man, once consumed by pain and cruelty, was now a beacon of hope, a living testament to the transformative power of love, family, and human connection. His journey from darkness to light was the most beautiful of stories, a legacy of overcoming that would echo for generations in the village, reminding that even in the greatest failures lies the seed of the deepest humanity.